Welcome everyone to the special meeting of Council for February the 11th, 2025 to discuss the capital budget. At this time, I'd like to recognize that we're on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people under the Robinson-Huron Treaty of 1850 and the waterways traveled by the Métis of this region. This meeting is live streamed, recorded, and available on the internet by visiting the Town of Parry Sound website at www.parrysound.ca. And there's no closed meeting, so we're right into the agenda. And mover and seconder to approve the agenda, Councillor McCann, Councillor Keith. All in favor of approving the agenda? That's carried. And we're going to hold questions of staff. And we're going to go to the budget overview. And I have moved by Councillor McCann and seconded by Councillor Borneman that the staff report for the 2025 budget overview and draft capital budget presentation be received for information purposes, and that Council approve the draft capital budget and direct staff to include it in the preparation of a bylaw to set estimates following the 2025 draft operating budget deliberations, and that the assimilative capacity study capital project on page 17 is approved to proceed due to time constraints and the importance of proceeding with this work to address wastewater capacity expansion at the wastewater treatment plant. So I take it Mr. Harris wants to make a few comments, and then we will turn it over to Ms. Phillips to give us the overview. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of comments. Our budget's driven by health and safety of all the infrastructure that we have in town, and making sure that we can deliver on a continuity of services, that we don't want services to be interrupted. And so again, proper maintenance of the infrastructure is important. We also supporting growth. We're seeing growth, a lot of inquiries and developments in town, and we want to make sure that we can continue to support that growth. I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie, but I do want to thank Stephanie. She's the labor-intensive person and pulls it all together. So don't know what I'd do without Director of Finance, Treasurer, Ms. Phillips, but she's going to go take you through the document. I think it's a sound budget, and open to any questions at the end.
Okay, thank you for that introduction. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and the public. Welcome to the 2025 draft capital budget presentation and deliberations. Okay, so what's on the agenda for tonight? We'll go through what's behind the 2025 budget and the fiscal policy framework that guides the capital budget preparation. We'll take a look at the interest rate and the inflation forecast, and the uncertainty regarding tariffs. We'll mention some items regarding that. I'll touch on some benchmarking information on the town's financial flexibility, and this will be related to reserves and debt usage. The adjusted annual repayment limit for debt and guarantees will be provided to Council. And I'll summarize the draft capital budget, provide some funding information and what makes up the town's dedicated capital levy. And then finally, we'll go through the recommended 2025 draft budget, draft capital items. Okay. So each year we provide budget training to our managers, and we share guidelines and expected impacts to assist them as they prepare their budgets. Then within the review stage, we challenge budget submissions and we review and analyze the inputs into the capital budget. And prior year projects are also reviewed to see how they're coming and assess whether new projects should move forward. And then those budgets are refined and the result is recommended to council as a draft budget. So tonight's budget deliberations will focus on capital, but next public budget deliberations will take place on February 25th and or March 25th for the operating budget. And that will include public requests. And information for the operating budget is still coming in and being reviewed, so that's still in preparation. Okay, so starting with the fiscal policy framework. So a number of policies guide the capital budget preparation. So first, the dedicated capital levy. So council has a policy where each year 1.8% tax increase is allocated solely to aging infrastructure. And then the reserve and reserve fund policy guides funding to and from reserves, as well as capital financing and debt management policy allows long-term debt to be considered for assets that have a useful life that exceeds 10 years or a value exceeding 500,000. In addition, there's a guidelines for annual repayment limit, which is the principal and interest payments on debt. So municipalities must keep that limit within 25% of own source revenues, and the town measures their annual repayment limit against a target maximum of 15% of own source revenues. So I'll touch on that a bit later. Okay. So for the interest rate, interest rates have been declining through 2024. So this will help with any planned long-term borrowing rates. So it's now at 3% compared to 5% at this time last year. So the Bank of Canada would likely cut interest rates or do nothing in response to aggressive tariff policies. So that is what economists are saying related to current events. And inflationary costs could result from tariffs and weaken the economy, but the impacts of that are relatively uncertain at this time. So on the topic of tariffs, more than 75% of Canada's exports go to the United States. So the impacts of tariffs on the municipality are uncertain. They could impact the price of heavy equipment, machinery, or fire trucks, and mostly they will directly impact manufacturing industries, but the results of that would be unknown at this time. And most would likely search for Canadian substitutes where available in response to tariffs. The duration and the impact of those are uncertain at this time, but current issues that could affect the capital budget. Okay, so benchmarking. So each year the town compares their performance against the BMA study, which collects data from 126 municipalities. This graph shows the town's reserves as a percentage of own source revenues. So as of the most recent study from 2023 data, the town's discretionary reserves are at 132% of own source revenues, and that compared to the BMA average of 70% is higher. So the projected numbers, including forecasted within the budget use of town reserves, would see that metric closer to 100% of own source revenues by 2025 if all carry forward projects come to completion by the end of the year, 2025. And this metric excludes water and wastewater reserves and reserve funds. Water and sewer reserves are forecasted at 10.8 million by the end of 2025. And just compared to the water and wastewater rate study, that's higher than forecasted amounts. So on that, should give some comfort on reserve balances by the end of the budget if everything is that's proposed is approved. Okay. Yes.
Before you go to the next slide, or whatever, do you want to take questions when we're done, or when you're done your presentation, and then that way, if people can hold them, that way it flows through?
I'm open to taking questions if it's
yeah.
on a particular slide.
Okay,
Or-
all right.
yeah.
Councillor McCann then?
Just wondered where that's coming from. Is that on a separate file?
It's not in the draft
It's not.
capital budget, but the numbers come from the BMA study and will be in the final budget, where it talks about the overview and how the town's doing compared to the average, but.
That's all it was.
Oh, okay. Okay, so not on a particular page, but it will be part of the final document. Okay, so this graph shows the town's percentage of own source revenues going towards interest payments on long-term debt. Excludes water and wastewater, but the town's tax debt interest as a percentage of own source revenues is slightly higher than the BMA average at 2.5% compared to 1%. So just shows that care should be taken in accessing long-term debt for the town's needs on those types of things. More on that on the next slide here. So what this is that you're looking at is a calculation of the annual repayment limit. So within the draft capital budget, there's some borrowing for the total budget for pump station 2 of 3.35 million. And the town's been asked to provide some guarantees. So for Belvedere, and then one will be coming forward for the West Parry Sound Rec and Cultural Center. So for this borrowing, the town's required to recalculate an adjusted annual repayment limit. So despite on the last side, interest payments as a percentage of own source revenues being higher than the BMA average, debt levels are still well within the limits here. And principal and debt payments are projected at about 9.25% OSR with all projected debts and guarantees adjusted. And this is in comparison to the max limit of 25%, or our target would be to remain below 15% OSR. So there's approximately 18.7 million in capital borrowing over 30 years at 5% remaining to the town's target max of 15% OSR. So that gives council a bit of idea of how much room is left after these projects to date. And this includes everything that I know of to date. Any questions on this one? No? Okay. So the draft capital budget includes 19.6 million in carry forward projects from 2024 and 18.1 million in new projects are being proposed. Of the total 37.7 million, 18.57 million is funded from grants, 3.35 million from debentures, 14.56 million from reserves and reserve funds, and 360,000 in other municipal funding. So a large portion of the budget's being funded from grants. And the annual tax levy request does not exceed the 1.8% dedicated levy for infrastructure per council's policy. Okay, so this chart shows how the 2025 draft capital budget projects are funded. So 54.5% provincial funding, 1.5 federal funding, 18% reserve funds, 19% reserves, and 5% current year property taxation, 2% other. This is from the current year capital projects. So the amount funded from property taxes has increased from 2024 to 2025 by 135,000, but does not exceed the 1.8% infrastructure funding. So on the next slide, I'll talk about how the dedicated levy is allocated. So this is where the the total capital levy, where it goes. The 1.8% generates about $246,020 additional in 2025. And 111,000 of that goes towards directly to reserve contributions. So the annual reserve contributions are increasing by 10%. And the remainder, which is 135,000, is going to in-year capital projects. And yeah. So the project shown here total to 888,000, which is funded directly from taxation, and then 519,000 to finance principal and debt payments for capital projects, and then the remainder to contribution to reserves. Any questions with that? Okay. So on page 10 of the draft capital budget, that's where the projects begin. So you can turn there. So there are a couple major multi-year projects and carry forward projects with additional requests. So what the presentation does is goes through the items with new requests. So I think I'll go through those first, and then if council had any more questions about items that are carrying forward, we can go through those at the end. Okay, so the largest project is Pump Station 2 project. So what this table shows is the carry forward amounts as well as some of the new amounts. So 7.2 million carries forward from 2024, and then an additional 10.7 million is budgeted new in 2025. So that includes water main upgrade portion of the project, sanitary gravity sewer replacement, storm sewer replacement, and the contingency. And this entire project was applied for the Hughes F grant funding. So 13.1 million of it is funded directly from a provincial grant, 3.35 million from debenture, and 360,000 from other municipal funding, and some from reserve and reserve funds, which comes from water and sewer servicing fees and a water or sewer development reserve funds that the town has. Any questions on that project? This is the major project that will help with housing, creation of housing and residential units. It's 2,400 change around there. Okay. So 10.7 million makes up a large portion of the 18 altogether of new projects. The other large project with additional requests for 2025 is Glen and Victoria stormwater and wastewater is included in that project. 4.2 million carry forward and a bit additional allocated here, 795,000 towards that project, which has been ongoing for a few years. Any questions?
Doug?
Is there any word on the progress? I've been asked if there's any kind of expected date of completion on Victoria. Not to put you on the spot, but just wondering.
Mr. Kearns?
Thank you, Your Worship. The intention is the constructor plans on being done in 2025 as soon as winter ends. They will be underway, and our understanding is they plan on bringing multiple crews in to work on both Victoria and Glen at the same time to speed the project up.
Thank you.
Councillor Ashford?
Oh, 3.7. So I'll defer that to Mr. Harris. It seems like.
Through the mayor, the province allows up to 25% contingency, and so we tend to put the maximum down. There's rock, there's lots of soil conditions that could require that. And we're getting 73% funding on that contingency if it had to be spent. If we didn't put it in that high and then ran into the costs, it'd all be on the taxpayer's dime.
Okay.
Okay. So other carry forward projects with additional funding, the ready room construction for the fire department. So 8,000's being received from a provincial grant towards fire training, and that's going to go towards that project. And equipment replacement reserves funds an additional 10,000 required for the plow for a loader. The BOCC ice surface sound system, the total cost is estimated at 60,000, so it's additional 40,000 budgeted there for the sound system, and that'll be funded from building replacement reserve. And performance hall lighting is requiring 10,000 more to be funded from the stocky reserve. Any questions on those?
Yep, I've got Councillor Borman, Councillor McCann, and Councillor Keith, and I'm really glad to see that in with the sound system because I hear a lot of complaints about that, so. Okay, Councillor Borman.
My question is, with all of these projects, are we ready to go? The things that need to be tendered, are the designs finished, or there RFPs to buy these products?
Certainly I can speak to some of it. So in a lot of cases, yes. Many of them are underway already. For instance, the ice surface sound system has all been spec'd already. One of the changes there was the wiring could not be reused that was installed with the previous sound system, so it has to be completely redone. So it's all been spec'd already in terms of the wiring. Once we have the go ahead with the additional funds, they're ready to pull the trigger in the off season and have it up and running. That one in particular. The plow for the loader is already underway. That was a replacement we talked about previously as well. That we had an issue where one was actually delivered that wasn't specified properly by the distributor, but they are underway. And the rest of the list of carry forwards, in a lot of cases, for instance, Ms. Phillips mentioned that SPS number 2 was a large proportion of that number. We were waiting on the funding, obviously, to make sure we could move forward with that, but the engineering is all in place. We're at about 90% in terms of the engineering. For instance, the Rail Safety Improvement Program, I had a conference call with Transport Canada last week Everything's in place. We're waiting on one person at CPKC to comment, and it's ready to go to tender. Glen and Victoria is proceeding this year with completion this year as well. So I know that SPS number 6, our large pump station, that's an ongoing project. It's actively underway right now. So although it shows it as a carry forward, there has been work occurring constantly since last year. The contractor is still on site on that one. So
It didn't go on. The mic didn't go on. There you go.
I just wonder how we make this process more streamlined so we aren't seeing that every year, that we, you know, that we're giving you folks the tools and the ability to do the things that we're mandating you to do before the price of those projects creep up, because none of them ever seem to go backwards.
So if I could offer your worship, thank you. I was looking at the list in the carry forward projects, and that's what I was indicating. So in pump station number 2, for instance, we showed a $6.7 million carry forward. However, the engineering was completed. The funding application was made. So that was something we weren't sure when that funding announcement was going to happen. So although it appears as a carry forward that nothing had been completed in 2024, all of the work necessary to start the project. And that project in particular is a multi-year project. So perhaps there's a better way for us to word it going forward when we put the dollar amounts for budget forward. If it's a multi-year project, perhaps we can indicate that at the start of it so that there isn't an appearance that we're falling behind. We knew that this would be a multi-year project when we started the process, especially in that one. Glen and Victoria is the same thing. That's a $4.2 million carry forward, which started last year but carried over into 2025. So that, my math's not great, but that's getting close to $10 million right there in those two projects. So it's not that there wasn't progress made in a lot of these things. SPS number 3, so there are some explanations. That's a $1.8 million project. Staff chose to actually shelf that project to make sure that some of the major ones ahead of it could proceed with the engineering. The engineering is actually complete on SPS number 3, and the intention is to go to tender this spring as well. So that's another almost $2 million there in a carry forward that will be happening very shortly. It will take more than just this year to complete as well. Often there's many components to these projects, especially when they're complex projects. So they are multi-year projects. I know I did mention, so the playgrounds, for instance, are showing as a $652,000 carryover. We did receive funding for that, which is great news. And the equipment is actually, we have possession of the equipment now. So it is in our yard. So although it's a carryover, it's queued up and ready to go in the spring. So there's a lot of these that maybe aren't as clear on paper as they could be, perhaps. And we'll look at maybe different ways of making it clearer that there is progress being made on these, that they're not completely stagnant, that there's not $18 million of capital work to start with, that it's well underway going forward. Church Street retaining walls, I see that as a $500,000. It's about 90% done. So this is a financial exercise right now because they are mostly complete. They're just a bit of cleanup work to do in the spring. So it's perhaps more of a housekeeping exercise on our part to make sure that these appear clearer going forward.
Councillor McCann? You're okay now? Councillor Keith?
Thank you. Well, Councillor Borneman did ask one of my questions, but I do have another question or a suggestion, whichever way it wishes to be taken, but it's a carryover. And yes, it is a smaller amount of money. But when I look, for example, at this carryover of this netting, 5,000 from reserves, and it budgeted for in 2021. Now, if indeed, there's been issues and one needs to re-examine how that netting needs to be done because of a variety of issues to make sure we got the right product. It just seems to me in that length of period of time, maybe it goes back to housekeeping. Frankly, and the way things are going, I doubt it'll end up being 5,000. I just don't understand why, when it's something like this, it hasn't been started anyway. So why doesn't it just get taken off the board, or if not taken off here in the chart, then rephrase it different, because it just looks like what's happening here from 2021. And I'm sure there's been some good efforts, but that isn't what comes across. And so I don't think it's real good communication.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, I don't disagree. That's what I'm saying. I think from a housekeeping perspective, we can get better on our end for sure. That one in particular, we had an idea of where we were going. Information came to light that particular idea often ended up in less than desirable outcomes, with birds being trapped. We spoke to counterports that were having issues with them, and birds are trapped, and then they were getting calls to come and rescue the birds that were now entrapped. And at height, no one had a really good way of doing that. So I think perhaps you're right, Councillor Keith, that could have come off the table at that point and re-examine it as a new project.
Just one other comment, and again, it's more of housekeeping, but I think that as these charts are presented to the public, and one would like to read it without feeling they are totally ignorant of knowledge. They'd like to know what they're reading, I think, or certainly I do. I know I spent some time trying to figure out what refrigerators we were talking about here for carryover, and it turned out, of course, it was the 2 commercial refrigerators replacement. That is in reference to Stocky Center, when of course it's needed, because we know those things don't last forever. But again, I just think for communication, it seems to me that if somehow we can come up with an acronym or something so that one looks at that and says, oh, that's Stocky Center, not spends her time thinking, is it over at Bobby Orr, or where is it? So it just seems to me that, again, the clear communication would be really helpful.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can definitely add Stocky Center to the beginning, or SC, so we know where it is. So should the netting remain, or? Yes, okay.
Councilor McCann?
This is the bird netting that goes over the rink we're talking about, the outdoor rink. So does the netting keep the birds out or the pucks in? What's the purpose of it?
Through Your Worship, 2 different types of netting. The netting on the end, the vertical netting keeps the pucks in, and the horizontal netting keeps the birds out. And it goes up in the ceiling.
Well, has that been a problem?
Yes. So the birds certainly like the shelter, and the ice does not like the birds, or the playing surface for that matter. So, or the people using the playing surface do not like the birds.
I just learned something. Thank you.
Okay, Ms.
Through
Phillips?
you, Mr. Mayor. So I think the reluctance to remove it was due to having to find some kind of solution. But before bringing it together with the total budget, I can revise the description, follow up with the manager, and get a new description. That would be.
Oh, Councilor McDonald has his hand up. Just noticed.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I just put it up. I would just like maybe for the public's benefit as well as my own clarification here on the item for the the replacement of the shopper docks. Is that to replace the existing ones?
Through your worship, yes, that's to replace the shopper's dock with a differently configured dock that allows for more parking area actually and accessibility down there.
Same location, but just better or new docks?
Yeah, correct. It's a little bit of a different configuration. The plan is to have a long section of dock close to the edge of the parquet wall that's there, and then several fingers coming off of that to allow for greater access for boats and safer parking for the boats as well.
Excellent.
Mr. Harris has a comment.
Through the chair, what we can do between now, between today and the capital budget comes forward for final approval. If there's any to carry forward items that we think should be removed, we'll do that in the final, and whether that's the netting or other things. In the meantime, if items that are going to stay, as Ms. Phillips said, we'll work on the description, the wording, but we'll take a look at and just double check whether anything could or should come off.
Councillor Keith and then Councillor McCann.
Yes, thank you. Another question I had was under the pump project. Could you educate me, the Suez I/0, because that's not the canal. So what is it, Suez upgrades? What does that really mean?
Through your worship, those are actually, Suez is the company that supplies the membranes at the water treatment plant. It's changed owners over the years. The latest owner is Suez, is the company name. So they are the manufacturers of the membranes, and those are input-output controls to help run the water treatment process.
Councillor McCann.
If we remove this thing with the netting, is it this time around, is there some means of archiving this wish list or building a wish list that's archived so that this is some consideration that maybe 3 or 4 years from now, it's not gone and forgotten totally? It sounds like it's important, but we just can't get it done.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So in this case, originally, it would have been funded from taxation, but when it doesn't get completed in the year, the accounting exercise, which happens is the unspent amount gets transferred into a reserve so that the next year it's still available. So that funding is in a reserve for the purpose of that. But so it wouldn't get lost altogether, but just wouldn't be planned for spending until it comes to council.
Okay. Continue on, Ms. Phillips.
Is that all the questions related to carry forward items? Maybe.
Open so.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So on to annual capital projects. So these projects here fund annual needs. So for instance, the laptop desktop replacement, that's an annual amount funded from reserve. Firefighters pooled gear, PPE, we spend that annually. Annual paving program is increased slightly at 589,000 compared to last year's amount of 400,000. The additional is to be funded through capital asset replacement reserve fund. The side 200,000 is budgeted to be funded from capital asset replacement reserve fund for sidewalks. Traffic light control system replacement. Each year we're spending close to 70,000 related to that. Culvert replacement and stormwater, 300,000 is funded from the infrastructure replacement reserve fund. Manhole repairs, 50,000, water meters, 60,000, and each year one the water plant lift and pumps, so one is rebuilt per year, which is approximately 60,000. So these are annual expenditures. Any questions related to those? Okay, so new capital projects. So, from development, some significant 718,750 is budgeted for Town Dock Stage 2, which is 218,750 from Capital Asset Replacement Reserve Fund, and the 500,000 is a grant from provincial government for significant repairs. Town dock washrooms, 200,000 is budgeted to be funded from the Capital Asset Replacement Reserve Fund for the rehabilitation of those washrooms at the town dock. Town dock sewage pump out, so 10,000 is budgeted for the relocation of the pump out to Big Sound Marina per the business case recommendations. Seguin Parquet roof, 15,000 is budgeted for that, and 10,000 for waterfront cameras. Any questions?
Councilor McCann?
Thank you. There was quite a lot of talk last year about the washroom facilities at the town dock, and Chief Thompson, I think I remember you saying that replacing them was an effort, certainly a challenge in getting the right material or components that needed. Do we have that sourced? Are we ready to go ahead with that? Do we know what that's going to look like at the end of this season?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Replacement of the existing equipment isn't possible. This $200,000 is for a complete redo of the washroom facilities there. They were, after looking at it with the designer, I've been utilizing FAD as a design group for that particular project. There was really no way to repair or rehabilitate what's there. So this is for a fairly major reconstruction of the facility, expansion, and not physical expansion, but removing some of the walls so that it's a lot better layout. It's more modern. It's right now, I mean, those washrooms aren't even separated, men's from women's, when you're in them. Above your 8-foot wall, that's open from one to the other. So there's a great number of upgrades that are going to be occurring with this. This project is ready to go. The design work has been done, and Pat has even gotten pricing from different contractors. And once approval occurs, this project's ready to go, with a hope that it would be completed before May 24th weekend.
Great, that's exciting. Thank you.
Councilor Keith, and then Councilor Ashford.
Yes, thank you. I have a couple of questions. I'm not clear, where is the Seguin Parquet roof?
Through Mr. Mayor, Seguin Parquet is where the Chippewa currently parks, that dock area. And that's the pavilion that's in that area. So there's the lighthouse, and then there's also the pavilion. Underneath the pavilion has the painters standing, as well as some seating areas and flowers and things like that. So that pavilion's roof is well beyond its best before date. And it's a shingled roof. That's a simple reshingle job.
And my second question had to do with the waterfront cameras. Is that already been sourced out? And how many cameras are we talking there? We're at the preliminary stage.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I've been working with IT on that particular project. That would place 3 cameras in the waterfront area, mostly around the town dock, not so much at the Seguin Parquet area, but mostly at the town dock, so that there would be viewing in the parking lot overlooking the kiosk, as well as up and down the dock in multiple directions to be able to observe that area.
Councilor Ashford, then Councilor Borneman.
I just had more of a suggestion or a worry that when I see the budget numbers and things going forward on the different projects along the waterfront, just as we're kind of developing and getting the waterfront master plan done, just that I always, whenever I go, I have to tear a piece of the wall out or change something in my home, I always try to future proof it.
don't buy the cable that works now, buy the cable that is the best possible one so that, 10 years down the road, you don't have to tear it all out again when you do it. And I'm just hoping that with these projects as they go, that those it sounds great if FAD's involved, they'll be thinking about those kind of things too, but just making sure we have those kind of things, like at some point, there might be an art installation that would require certain infrastructure down at the water, whether it be electricity or lighting or those kind of things that, depending how the waterfront master plan goes and what options are available to us, just keeping in mind that we have all those things available. So we're not saying, no, the physical building can't handle it or those kind of things. And especially like string lighting and things like that are often a nice way to make our shared public spaces beautiful.
Counselor Borman?
My question was kind of along that same line. I was wondering if any thought had been given to metal roofing or something more permanent than shingles. Shingles seem to last shorter periods of time all the while.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, with regards to the C1 Parkette, we were looking to replace what was currently there with a similar product. All our shingles now really come in the architectural models, not 3-tab shingles anymore. However, we hadn't considered upgrading to include metal roofing. That would be a significant upgrade, at least double the cost. So that's where we're at. That's what's in the budget. We'd be replacing what's there with a very similar product to rehabilitate that structure.
We can continue? Okay, go ahead, Ms. Phillips.
Okay, moving on to protection. So there's 15,000 budgeted for bylaw enforcement body cams. 330,000 towards the first stage of the purchase of pump 2 fire truck from the fleet reserve, funded from the fleet reserve. 15,000 budgeted for West Parry Sound dispatch console. Any questions related to the protection items? No.
Seeing any? Go.
Okay, so on to transportation. Okay, so 670,000 budgeted for retaining walls from the capital asset replacement reserve fund. Mike, which area was this again? Sorry, I'm gapping on that.
This would include William Street and Miller Street.
Thank you. So 470,000 budgeted for a sweeper truck from the, so half or a little more than half funded from the fleet reserve and 202,000 from the tax levy, which this is a bit of a service level increase. So that's hence the split there. Snow plow, so 430,000 is budgeted towards unit 08100 from the fleet reserve. Downtown parking lot sweeper, 255,000 from the equipment replacement reserve. Backhoe, 240,000 from the equipment replacement reserve. Another 20,000. Last year we had 20,000 to rehabilitate some downtown decorative lighting, and another 20,000 has been budgeted this year for that. Mill Lake Dock, 35,000 to replace that from the capital asset replacement reserve fund. Any questions about these ones?
Councilor McCann?
Is there a difference, the sweeper truck and a downtown parking lot sweeper? Can this, I get it, the sweeper truck is a bigger machine. Can that not do the parking lot as well? I guess I'm looking for an education here.
Through your worship. So we've actually taken delivery of the small sweeper. That was the one we had explained was beneficial from a downtown perspective. It can be used on the sidewalks, smaller areas. It actually fits underneath the Seaman Street Bridge as well. on the fitness trail or on that fitness trail extension to the BOCC, for instance. Whereas the large one is a street sweeper. So it's a full size, not capable of doing the sidewalks. I guess it would be a challenge to try and sweep the streets with the small sidewalk sweeper. So the small one was meant to replace the vacuum unit that we have that has seen better days and is not performing very well at all. So it also has metal brushes on it to help remove the vegetation from the interlocking stone, which was discovered to be a bit of an issue last year as well. So that small one is a very versatile machine, but meant for smaller areas and narrower areas.
Okay, thanks. I only asked because I saw the word lot, I had a downtown parking lot, so I was thinking maybe like the parking lot next to the church downtown or the other ones. Not the
That
sidewalks.
and in behind off of Miller Street, it's very difficult to maneuver a full-size street sweeper effectively. We don't want to get that close with a 400 and several $1,000 machine to the buildings and vehicles and that sort of thing. Whereas the small one's meant to operate in those confined areas effectively.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor McDonald online there.
Yes, thank you. The downtown decorative lighting, is that just to rewire the fixtures in the existing lights and the outlets that are within them to make them usable again?
Through your worship, yes, that's correct. The fixtures, it replaces the fixture inside the existing housing. The fixtures are no longer supported or repairable, unfortunately.
How many are there slated to be repaired, you know?
I believe that will allow, we were shooting for 10 per year to get them done over about 5 years, I believe. So we're into our second or third year of that now. The part of the reason is that if we wait until they're non-functional, we won't have any lighting available. So we're trying to pick and choose which ones are the most problematic, replace those as we go. And there is a possibility that we end up with 1 or 2 of those units that gets replaced that could be a spare should we run into issues in the future. But for the most part, we're choosing ones that are non-functional on an annual basis just to try and get through them over a 5-year cycle, I believe was our intention.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Boleski and then Councillor Keith.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just noticed that other screen isn't working. Is there any chance of getting it turned on? The audience can see it.
Yeah. Councillor Keith?
I think Councillor McDonald must have mental telepathy because he had my question.
Oh, okay. All right. Good enough. Okay, Ms. Phillips, continue.
So environmental, so 240,000 budgeted towards Joseph Street culvert replacement, funded from what was formerly the gas tax, Canadian Community Building Fund. Assimilative capacity study, 150,000 funded from the wastewater stabilization reserve. Any questions related to those?
Okay, Councillor Keith.
Yeah, thank you. The assimilative capacity study, what was that, please?
It's through your worship. So it's a study that essentially gives us the current condition of the receiving body from the wastewater plant, its ability to receive new flows and or differently treated flows from a sewage treatment plant. So it's basically it tells us what we can discharge into the receiving body, which is part of the process that the MACP requires going forward when we're looking at changing capacities or changing treatment processes or anything related to the quantity and quality of the discharge from the wastewater plant.
We're good? Okay, continue.
Okay, from Health Services, 17 ambulance defibrillators and 2 replacement ambulances are included, funded from the EMS Equipment Capital Reserve Fund. Recreation and Culture. So 50,000 to go towards performance hall equipment upgrades. And this is to be funded from the Stocky Reserve. Security cameras, 25,000. This is Stocky security camera project. Stocky interior refresh, 25,000. Flat roof repairs, 10,000. And Stocky shed for storage for 5,000. Those were funded from the Stocky Reserve.
On the Stocky Center projects, is there any chance we can get some NOHFC funding?
So they are searching for funding, federal funding for the performance hall equipment upgrade. So half of that to be funded from federal funding. And I'm sure on the others, we can definitely continue to look for funding sources.
Yeah, the only reason I ask is that when Minister Rickford was here at one point, he said that I believe he mentioned that we should ask, whatever. He felt there might be some opportunity for some freshening up funding. So if we can reach out, that would be wonderful.
Maybe on the interior refresh project in particular, which take a look at that one and see if we can find something.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks. Councilor Borneman.
3 or 4 places we see cameras, and I'm not opposed to that. I think it's a great idea, but do they qualify for monies? These technological improvements, there always seems to be streams of dollars for upgrades in that regard.
Through the chair, they may. We were installing cameras on the fitness trail, and that qualified in relation to tourism. So we have finance as a grant match application. So we put in what we're looking for, and that application matches it to existing grants. So there may be technology grants, there may be tourism grants that qualify, maybe security of property. I mean, we look for various ways to get a grant.
Councilor Keith.
Yes, Mr. Harris, I'm a little curious. How long have we had this ability? I mean, it sounds like a great service, and they would cut down on trying to rack one's brain.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We've had the subscription to it for about 3 years, and what it does is it highlights hot or highly desirable grants, as well as it allows you to search for grants that match with whatever projects that you have. So there's still some searching required, but it's kind of like a repository, a directory of all available grants. So if you're looking for something, it's a source to start at that compiles and pulls them in from all different sources.
It sounds like they would allow more efficiency, cut down on time, just looking and looking.
Yeah.
A good starting point.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it also allows over time for you to develop some like grant strategies. So if you have financing plans over time, you can kind of match with grants and to projects and sort of things. Yeah.
Councilor McDonald.
Thank you. Going back to Councillor Borneman's point there about the cameras, and I imagine all the ones that are going to be installed will have recording capabilities for say up to a month or whatever it is. In that too, would there also be signage posted to indicate that we have security cameras recording to also increase awareness that there is additional security there as well?
I think we have to. I think it's the law, isn't it? Ms. Phil?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I know we have staff that are specialized in the requirements of those of surveillance cameras, our IT staff
Yeah.
in particular. So I'm sure they'll follow all requirements related to surveillance.
Councilor McCann?
Just another question. In terms of all the cameras that we have and that we're putting in, do they all talk to a central system? Do they record and archive a certain amount of footage for a length of time? What does the overall system look like? I gather we're not just putting cameras up and then wiring them to a monitor somewhere. There's more to it than that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Chief?
I think Mr. Kearns will help me answer this question. We do run a few different types of systems. There are systems specifically that Public Works controls that monitor traffic and things of that nature, as well as the systems that are around the municipal office and the fire hall are one centralized system. As technology changes so fast that when we put a system in 3 or 4 years, when we're upgrading, we may not be using the same system again because there's either better technology or cheaper technology, less expensive technology. I apologize, not cheaper, less expensive technology, or things that are just going to function better for our purposes. So I don't think that we should be thinking of utilizing one system to do it all, because the technology just changes so fast. And we actually have different purposes for the cameras in different areas. Most definitely in the front of the fire hall and around this building, there's a real security issue, and we're trying to document the things that go on in those areas. But when we're talking about the waterfront cameras, I think there's going to be for different purposes. Obviously, there's still a security purpose, but there may also be a tourism or other purposes that they can be used for. And the systems that utilize here may not necessarily be the best for a system that's utilized elsewhere.
Thank you. I shouldn't have lumped them all in together with one system, but that was the gist of what I was asking. Yeah.
Anything further? Okay, Ms. Phillips?
Okay. I guess we've reached the end of that. Okay, so thank you for listening. Are there any questions on any projects that I didn't touch on or remaining related to anything? No.
Councilor Borneman?
As a follow-up to the roll forward projects, the dollars that we're budgeting for this year, are we prepared? What's our state of readiness to get those tenders out ASAP to get the work underway during 2025? Especially the big one. Because like I say, it'll only cost more next year, it seems.
So through you, your worship, so SPS number 2 includes reconstruction of Champagne Street, Birch, and Parry Sound Road, as well as the extension of the force main to the wastewater plant from SPS number 2, the new construction. So the design engineering is probably approaching 90% right now. There's just a few details. We had a meeting this morning, myself and Mr. O'Donnell, regarding the specific layouts with inside the building, the mechanical systems, just finalizing those designs. So we're ready as soon as the tender will be going out before the construction season begins. That's the intention for that large project. probably within the next month or two. Now that, keeping in mind, this is a multi-year project that has to be staged appropriately. So that's one of the things we're still determining, the best staging of the project, because there are some very specific construction components. There's structural, mechanical in the building itself, as well as pipe, linear, and then surface restoration. And those are different contractors. So there's a couple of different ways that that contract can happen, whether we separate it into very specific portions of the project or there's a general contractor. Those are details that we're just finalizing. That was part of the meeting today, and we're having an on-site meeting next week to finalize.
Yep, follow up.
As a follow-up, do we have any idea of what kind of impacts it'll have on the public boat launch and parking at the base of Champagne Street at this point, Mr. Kearns?
So that is a large part of the discussion we're having. And I'm not going to be able to sugarcoat it. It will have significant impacts for a period of time until we make those improvements. So we'll make sure we communicate all of that well ahead of time and look at the construction scheduling. Obviously, we discussed it today that the best time to construct is also the best time to launch your boat. So unfortunately, there's going to be some overlap that is completely unavoidable. We'll certainly try and minimize it, but it is a significant and complex project. So that's part of why we want to make sure that we structure it properly to minimize the impacts.
Well, we don't have to worry about any salt dock anyway. Lots of room there. Councillor Borneman.
The understanding that, is there a way for us to best utilize the property at the salt docks? That's where, that the town beach is going to be full one way or the other, but there would seem to be at this point more room available at the salt dock to park cars, trucks, trailers, whatever. Can we somehow lay that out in some kind of grid so we don't just have mass chaos down there? Some way of getting people
Park in some orderly fashion.
Well, hopefully without too much damage or carnage.
That is something we can certainly do. We can delineate and hope that folks follow the delineation as much as possible. But you're right. There's a significant amount of area there, which should allow for certainly adequate parking. And if we need to remind folks of launch etiquette in terms of get your boat off the trailer, get out of the way, get your boat on the trailer, get out of the way, sort of as quickly as possible, we can also do that to make sure that the turnaround time isn't extended.
Right. Councillor McCann.
Thank you. I'm hoping someday that the salt dock area will become a green space as part of our waterfront. But for the time being, is there a lease in place right now that would sort of forbid what we could or couldn't do on that lot, or is it? Or does the town have carte blanche at this point? I was just wondering what the state of the leaseholder is at this point, or leasee.
So through your worship, the leasee still maintains a lease on the property at this point. They have indicated they have no intentions of bringing salt back to the dock, but currently the lease remains as is. So that being said, during the summertime, according to that lease, the town has essentially use of the majority of the dock, and without them intending to bring salt back, that it could be presumed that we have the ability to utilize the entire space.
That's interesting. Thank you.
Anything further?
Oh, just that through you, Mr. Mayor, there's an upcoming special budget meeting scheduled for the operating budget for February 25th, and another additional meeting for March 25th in case we need that. At this time, we still have some levy requests coming in and things. So if things don't come together in the next week, then the February 25th meeting may be canceled and deferred to the March 25th meeting. But I will keep council advised as to how that's going and update the website and everything. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. All in favor of the resolution? That's carried. Thank you. Do we have a confirming bylaw or just adjournment? Oh, well, the next meeting council's the 18th, right? Okay. No, we don't have a confirming bylaw for this meeting. We'll do that at the next meeting. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.